Welcome back to tonight's journey. Before we begin, take a slow breath, settle into your space, and imagine the quiet rhythm of an empty railway at dusk. The world has gone still. The tracks stretch forward like a silver thread, disappearing into the dark. No passengers. No guards. No whisper of metal on metal. Yet, in many places around the world, countless witnesses insist that something still moves along these forgotten lines long after the stations closed, and long after the final timetable was erased. These are the stories of so-called ghost trains, phantom locomotives that appear without warning, glide across abandoned railways, and vanish just as quickly as they arrive. Some claim to have seen glowing carriages rushing through mist. Others describe a silent engine passing by with no smoke, no steam, and no vibration under their feet. There are even reports of trains appearing on lines that have been removed for decades, as if time itself briefly folds and reveals a scene from another era. What makes these stories so compelling is not just their eerie atmosphere, but the consistency of the testimonies. From Europe to Asia to North America, different people, strangers to one another, separated by oceans and languages, have reported remarkably similar encounters. They speak of trains that leave no trace, no sound, and no logical explanation. Are these sightings echoes of tragic railway accidents? Are they illusions brought on by the mind in lonely places? Could electromagnetic forces near old rail routes interfere with human perception? Or is it possible that certain moments in history leave behind impressions that continue to replay, like a memory recorded in the environment itself? Tonight, we will follow these mysterious tracks into the unknown. No jump scares, no shock tactics. Just a slow descent into one of the most intriguing railway legends on Earth, where science, memory, and mystery intersect. For many witnesses, the most unsettling detail is not the sight of a mysterious train, but the way it disappears. In countless accounts, the experience follows a similar pattern: a distant light, a growing shape, and the unmistakable outline of a locomotive moving with purpose, only for it to fade before reaching the next bend or crossing. No wind follows in its wake. No rails tremble. No dust rises from the ground. It is as if the scene is made of light and memory rather than steel and weight. Some observers describe the trains as transparent, like reflections on water. Others say they looked completely solid until the final moment, when the engine simply dissolved into the air. Strangely, these visions do not always bring fear. Many witnesses report a strange calm, as though they are watching something important unfold, a replay of a moment that once existed but no longer belongs to the present. There are also cases in which people claim to hear distant whistles or the soft clatter of wheels long before anything appears on the tracks. The sound grows closer, clearer, and then nothing. No train, no lights, no movement. Just silence, as if the world had swallowed the noise whole. These sound first encounters are among the most puzzling, because they happen even where tracks have been abandoned or removed entirely. Skeptics often point to illusions, tricks of the light, or the brain's tendency to create meaning out of uncertainty. But believers notice the patterns, the same descriptions, the same vanishing endings, the same quiet sense of unfinished history. If this phenomenon were only imagination, why would so many unrelated witnesses tell nearly identical stories? Perhaps these disappearances are the key. They suggest that whatever people are seeing is not a physical object in the present, but a trace, a replay, a fragment, or a memory slipping through the cracks of time. Across many regions, ghost train sightings are most common near the sites of past railway tragedies. Old documents and local records describe derailments, collisions, bridge collapses, and fires that claimed many lives during the early age of rail travel. In those days, safety systems were limited, and long-distance communication was slow. When disaster struck, it was sudden, violent, and unforgettable. For the communities that lived beside the tracks, these events left scars that lasted for generations. Witnesses often speak of strange apparitions returning on the anniversary of an accident, as if the train were repeating the final moments of its journey. Some say they have seen a locomotive rushing forward at impossible speed, frozen in its last desperate attempt to stop. Others mention dim silhouettes inside the carriages, not detailed faces, just shapes, like impressions left on a fading photograph. Historians believe these memories survived because railroads were once the lifeline of entire towns. A single train carried workers, families, letters, soldiers, hopes, and futures. When a tragedy occurred, it was not just metal that shattered, it was the rhythm of daily life. People gathered along the tracks to search through the wreckage, waiting for names to be read, hoping someone they loved was not among the fallen. In such moments, grief imprinted itself deeply on local memory. For believers in the supernatural, this emotional weight explains why certain locations feel charged. They argue that intense human experiences, fear, sorrow, shock, do not simply vanish. Instead, they linger, replaying like echoes trapped in a looping fragment of time. From this view, the ghost train is not a threat, but a reminder of something that once happened and refused to be forgotten. Skeptics offer a different angle. When a community shares a powerful story, future generations may interpret ordinary sights and sounds through the lens of that memory. A distant light becomes a phantom engine. A gust of wind across old rails becomes a final scream. Whether supernatural or psychological, these stories reveal how tragedy shapes the way people see the world long after the rails have gone silent. In recent years, a number of researchers have looked away from folklore and turned their attention towards something far more measurable: electromagnetic fields. Old railway lines, especially those built with large amounts of iron and surrounded by long cables, can create unusual electromagnetic conditions. Even after a track is abandoned, traces of these fields may continue to exist beneath the soil, in the rock, or along buried infrastructure that was never fully removed. Scientists studying perception have discovered that strong electromagnetic fluctuations can influence the human brain, particularly the areas responsible for vision, memory, and emotional response. Under certain conditions, the brain may begin to interpret its own electrical signals as external sights or sounds. A flash becomes a headlamp. A faint vibration inside the skull becomes the rumble of wheels. A distant noise becomes the echo of a whistle on the wind. According to this theory, a ghost train might not exist outside the observer at all. It could be a projection shaped by memory, expectation, or fear triggered by energy in the environment. This would explain why some witnesses report incredibly vivid images, while others, standing nearby, see nothing at all. If the experience is happening inside the mind, perception becomes personal, real to one person, invisible to the next. Critics of the electromagnetic explanation argue that it cannot account for every detail. How do multiple witnesses sometimes report the same vision? How can a hallucination appear in full shape, with consistent movement, and vanish at the same spot along a track? But supporters respond that shared memories, shared history, and shared anticipation can guide the mind toward the same pattern, like several people seeing shapes in the same cloud. Whether or not this theory is correct, it introduces a fascinating possibility. Perhaps the ghost train is not a spirit, but a mirror, not a visitor from the past, but a reflection formed by the human mind under the influence of forces it does not fully understand. Another explanation, often mentioned in discussions about ghost trains, is the concept of residual memory, the idea that powerful events can leave lasting impressions on a place. According to this view, the world around us is not just stone, soil, and metal. It is a canvas that can hold memories, especially memories tied to intense emotion and dramatic moments. Just as a photograph captures light from a single instant, some believe that locations marked by history can hold fragments of what once happened there. Supporters of this theory suggest that when people witness a phantom train, they are not seeing the present at all. Instead, they are catching a glimpse of the past, an old moment replaying itself like a silent recording. The train does not interact with the world, does not alter its surroundings, and makes no lasting impact, because it is merely an echo, not a living event. The sighting begins, plays out in a familiar pattern, and then ends, always in the same place, always in the same way. This idea is often compared to a song that lingers in an empty hall after the musicians have gone. The music is gone, but the memory of it still vibrates. In the same sense, a ghost train sighting is not a haunting presence with intention or awareness, but a leftover imprint, a trace of motion, sorrow, or routine that refuses to disappear completely. Of course, this explanation remains unproven. There is no instrument capable of detecting memory in stone or measuring emotional residue in the air. Yet people are drawn to the idea because it offers something comforting. The thought that time is not truly lost, that moments continue in some hidden way, even after life has moved on. Whether real or imagined, the echo theory adds a poetic layer to the mystery. It suggests that ghost trains are not warnings, illusions, or supernatural threats, but stories replaying again and again, waiting for someone to notice. Before turning fully to the supernatural, many investigators prefer to look first at nature itself. Railways often cut through open fields, lakesides, valleys, and long stretches of empty land where fog, mist, and temperature shifts are common. Under these conditions, light behaves in unpredictable ways. A distant lamp, a reflection from a house window, or even the moon can bend, distort, or stretch into shapes that look eerily like a glowing train moving across the horizon. At night, when depth perception is weaker and contrast is high, the human eye becomes especially vulnerable to misinterpretation. A thin bank of fog can turn a small flicker of light into a long, shining line. Heat rising from the ground can bend reflections, creating illusions that seem to float just above the surface. In rare cases, a phenomenon known as temperature inversion can even carry sound over great distances, allowing the rumble of a faraway freight train to seem close, or to appear as though it is travelling on tracks that no longer exist. Some sightings may also be linked to refraction, where layers of warm and cool air bend light like a lens. This can project an image from far away, making a real train on a different track appear as though it is gliding along an abandoned line. To an observer who is tired, alone, or already aware of old railway legends, the mind may fill in the missing pieces, shaping light and sound into something familiar, a locomotive that never arrives. These explanations do not account for every story, but they remind us of an important truth. The boundary between perception and reality is fragile, especially in quiet, isolated places where imagination has room to breathe. A ghostly vision on an old rail line may be nothing more than nature, painting illusions in the dark, yet to the one who witnesses it, the experience feels absolutely real. While ghost trains are often described in visual detail, many researchers believe that the true engine behind these sightings may be the human mind itself. Our brains are built to find patterns, to connect scattered impressions into something we recognize, especially in places already tied to strong stories. When someone stands alone by an old railway at night, surrounded by silence and memories, the imagination becomes unusually alert. A flicker becomes movement. A hum becomes a distant engine. The mind begins to complete the picture, even when the senses offer only fragments. Psychologists note that expectation is a powerful force. If a person has heard tales of a phantom locomotive traveling the same route, their brain becomes primed to notice anything that fits the story. This is not deception, it is instinct. Humans are storytellers by nature, and once a narrative takes hold in a community, it can shape perception for generations. In many towns, ghost train legends are passed down like family heirlooms. People grow up hearing their grandparents speak of a tragedy, a final journey, or a night when a train never reached its station. These tales become part of local identity. So when someone later witnesses an unexplained flicker of light or a phantom sound in the distance, the conclusion seems obvious. The train has returned. This phenomenon is known as collective memory, a shared belief that influences what people expect to see, and therefore what they think they see. Even when multiple witnesses report the same event, it may be less about a physical apparition and more about a community shaped by the same stories, the same fears, and the same longing to hold on to the past. Far from weakening the mystery, this psychological layer adds depth to it. It suggests that ghost trains live not only on abandoned tracks and forgotten maps, but also within us in the memories we guard, the history we inherit, and the meanings we attach to places that refuse to be forgotten. Ghost train legends do not exist in only one country or language. They appear in small villages, industrial towns, coastal regions, and places where the last station closed long ago. Each culture gives the phenomenon its own flavor, shaped by local beliefs and history. In some regions, the ghost train is seen as a warning, a sign that something tragic once happened or might happen again. In others, it is a messenger from the past, quietly traveling the same route it did in life, unable to change its course. The folklore spreads most easily in places where the railway once symbolized hope and connection. A train brought news, goods, and strangers from distant cities. It carried soldiers to war and brought them home again. It delivered farewells and reunions. Because of this emotional weight, railroads became a natural stage for storytelling. When a mysterious light appears on abandoned tracks, it is not surprising that communities interpret it through the lens of old tales. Storytelling also has a unifying effect. When people gather to share legends around a fire, at a cafe, or during family meals, the ghost train becomes more than a rumor. It becomes part of the cultural memory. Someone claims their uncle saw it once. Another recalls a friend who heard the whistle at midnight. Over time, the story gains shape, detail, and authority, even without proof. Some anthropologists believe ghost train folklore thrives because it answers emotional needs rather than scientific questions. It gives shape to grief, nostalgia, and unfinished history. It offers a way for communities to speak about loss without naming it directly. In this sense, the ghost train is not merely a phantom on the rails, but a symbol, a reminder of the past still moving through the present. Whether passed on through whispers or written into local legends, these stories keep the tracks alive long after the last real journey has ended. The rails may rust, the stations may crumble, but the tale continues, carried forward by culture itself. For every story of a phantom locomotive, there are voices that rise with firm skepticism. To scientists, historians, and investigators who rely on measurable evidence, ghost trains simply do not fit into the physical rules that govern the world. They argue that if an object, even a silent one, had mass, light, and motion, it would leave traces, disturbed gravel, vibrations in the railbed, or at the very least, a thermal signature. Yet, again and again, sightings leave nothing behind. No footprints of physics. No data that can be tested in a lab. Skeptics point out that human perception is notoriously unreliable, especially at night or in isolation. Memory can distort. Vision can deceive. Sound can travel in strange ways. They insist that without concrete recordings, not blurry photos, not second-hand stories, not folklore, the most rational conclusion is that ghost trains are illusions woven from emotion, expectation, and coincidence. Some investigators go even further, suggesting that once a story becomes popular, confirmation bias takes over. People unconsciously search for signs that match what they already believe. A distant industrial light, a passing truck on a hidden road, or a far-off train on another line can be misread as something supernatural. In this view, the legend grows not because it is real, but because the human mind is eager to make meaning out of uncertainty. Despite this rational stance, skeptics admit there is one complication: the consistency of many reports. When multiple witnesses, across different decades, describe the same disappearing engine at the same spot, it raises a question that science does not easily dismiss. Why do the patterns repeat? Why do the stories align? To the skeptical eye, there must be a logical answer, one the world simply has not uncovered yet. But until that answer comes, the phenomenon remains in a strange space between dismissal and curiosity. Not proven, not accepted, not fully explained. Despite every scientific objection, there are people who remain unshaken in their belief. They do not speak in theories or probabilities, they speak from experience. Many of these witnesses are former railway workers, night shift station guards, travellers, or locals who have lived near the tracks their entire lives. They know the rhythm of the rails, the sound of a real train, the reflection of its lights, and the weight of its presence. When they say they saw something extraordinary, they insist they can tell the difference. Some recount moments that changed them forever: a silent locomotive gliding past an abandoned platform, a line of dimly lit carriages moving without passengers, or a headlamp cutting through thick fog, even though the rails ahead had been removed years before. They describe not fear, but a surreal calm, as if time slowed and reality thinned for just a moment. To them, it was not a trick of the light or a story planted by memory. It was there, undeniable. Believers often ask a simple question. If it was just imagination, why did other people see it too at the same place, in the same way, years apart? They point to patterns that skeptics struggle to dismiss, especially locations with repeated sightings across generations. In these communities, the testimony of elders carries weight. A grandparent's whispered account becomes a reference point. When a younger witness later sees something similar, the connection feels too precise to ignore. For those who have seen a ghost train, the experience becomes a private landmark in their life. Some avoid the tracks afterward. Others return, not out of fear, but out of wonder, hoping to witness it again, to confirm that the moment was real. They do not ask to be believed by the world. They only insist on one truth: they know what they saw. In the end, their certainty keeps the mystery alive. As long as witnesses continue to speak, the phenomenon refuses to fade into silence. The mystery of ghost trains lives in a space that is neither fully accepted nor fully dismissed. This in-between world is where the phenomenon becomes most fascinating. On one side stands science, demanding measurable proof and verifiable evidence. On the other stands human experience, memory, emotion, and testimony that cannot be placed under a microscope. The two sides rarely meet, yet neither has succeeded in silencing the other. For investigators who rely on instruments and data, every story without physical trace is an unanswered question, not a revelation. But for those who have seen something with their own eyes, the lack of evidence changes nothing. They do not feel uncertain. They feel chosen, as though they briefly glimpsed a layer of reality hidden from everyone else. This tension creates a unique balance. If ghost trains were easily explained, the legend would fade. If they were undeniable fact, the mystery would vanish. Instead, the phenomenon survives precisely because it cannot be fully captured. Each new sighting renews curiosity. Each unanswered question invites another. And so the story continues, not as proof or myth alone, but as a dialogue between what is known and what might exist beyond our understanding. There is also a deeper layer to this crossroads, the human desire for connection with the past. Some people want to believe because belief is comforting. Others refuse to believe because certainty feels safer than wonder. Yet both groups share something important. They are trying to make sense of a world filled with unanswered echoes. In this sense, ghost trains are not just about rails and engines. They are about perspective. They remind us that the world is shaped as much by how we see it as by what is actually there. And in that quiet space between logic and imagination, the legend continues to travel not on steel tracks, but through conversation, curiosity, and the restless corners of the human mind. The truth behind ghost trains remains elusive. After more than a century of stories, theories, investigations, and whispered accounts, there is still no final answer to settle the debate. Are these sightings born from the mind, shaped by memory and imagination? Are they tricks of light, echoes of tragedy, or electromagnetic disturbances that blur the edges of perception? Or could they be something else entirely, a reminder that the world still holds mysteries beyond our current understanding? Each explanation offers a piece of the puzzle, but none complete it. And perhaps that is why the legend endures. The ghost train is a symbol of something larger, the unfinished, the unexplained, the moments that refuse to disappear quietly into history. Just like a real train journey, the story travels forward, passing from witness to witness, generation to generation, never arriving at a final station. There is a gentle irony in this. Railroads once represented certainty, a straight line from one destination to another, guided by schedules, maps, and steel. Yet their most mysterious tales are defined by uncertainty. The ghost train has no timetable, no conductor, no destination we can chart. It appears without warning and vanishes without answers, leaving only questions behind. And so, the rail lines may rust, the sleepers may rot, and the stations may fall silent. But the mystery continues to move, unbound by time. It invites us to listen, to wonder, and to accept that not everything must be solved to be meaningful. Some stories are meant to be explored, not conquered. Whether ghost trains are illusions, echoes, or something beyond our comprehension, one thing is clear. The legend has carved its own track, not through landscapes, but through imagination. And on quiet nights, when the wind settles and the world is still, some listeners claim they can almost hear it, a distant rhythm, fading in the dark. As we close tonight's story, perhaps the answer to the ghost train mystery is not something we must choose, but something we are meant to sit with. Between memory and science, between silence and imagination, there lies a vast landscape of possibilities. Maybe that is where these phantom locomotives truly travel, not on abandoned tracks, but through the questions we dare to ask and the wonders we allow ourselves to feel. Whether you believe ghost trains are echoes of history, illusions shaped by nature, or signals from something beyond our understanding, the legend invites each of us to pause and listen. Sometimes, mysteries are not obstacles to be solved, but gentle reminders that the world has layers we have not yet touched. Thank you for spending your time on this quiet journey with me. If you enjoyed exploring this story, you are welcome to return for more tales where history, memory, and mystery cross paths in the dark. Until then, rest well, stay curious, and may your night be peaceful. Good night.